Good afternoon, or good evening, or good morning, and welcome to today's brochure. So today we're actually looking at something that I still class as a new car. But when I looked at the date that this brochure was actually copyrighted, I realised that it's actually now quite old. It's certainly about 12, 13 years ago that this brochure came out. July 2008. The brochure itself is for what was, I suppose, Ford's first, unless you count the Maverick from the 90s, first sort of proper entry into the sports utility segment. It used, or was based on, a platform that was very similar in design to that of, I believe, the Mondeo. It was available with four-wheel drive and other sort of options, which made it appealing to those that wanted something of a higher up driving position, but also something that would sort of handle slightly rougher terrain if it was called upon to do so. They sold fairly well. They were sort of quite popular, and the brochure itself does seem to sort of focus on a few of its sort of lifestyle features. They were, when new, bought by people that wanted something that was a little bit different to, say, a Mondeo or something else from that sort of class. So they opted for this, which gave them a raised driving position, gave them the sporty twin exhaust at the back, as you can see there, but they didn't lose the practicality of the standard sort of saloon and hatchback cars they had been used to. The car itself was a very practical design. Obviously hatchback and seating for 5, and actually quite a good looking car, especially with these sort of the scallops down the side and the creases in the door and little vents or fake vents at the front, which were something that Ford were doing quite a lot on their sort of larger, more premium class models, I suppose you would say. Certainly one thing that was really all the rage around them was these, and well, certainly more of the rage, all the rage back then than they are now, although you do have them, was this sort of panoramic roof treatment. So you actually had the full, well, the sort of partially full glass roof. What you generally had inside was you had this glass on top, but then you had a frame made up inside and obviously trimmed, but you didn't get a full sort of glass opening. You got either a sort of reduced aperture, so obviously a certain amount of rigidity would be maintained, or you almost got sort of like a side-to-side bar, so a bar running from there to there, and then you had two distinct separate sections which you could run a blind over. So we'll actually see in a moment. Hopefully it'll give us a shot of the interior and certainly the roof space, so we can see what they actually employed in this instance. There's nothing really shocking to write home about the interior. It's very much late, early 2000s Ford. The interior is very similar to that of the Mark IV Mondeo. Obviously it differs to the Mark IV Mondeo, but the entire sort of treatment, the colours, the materials used are indeed very similar. There's obviously some shared switchgear there as well, as you would expect from Ford. A lot of switchgear shared between the different models means you reduce costs overall. One thing that they did come with was keyless start, so you just have the power button there which you can press. If you notice here, the ignition barrel section has just been covered over with that blanking panel. Other features, there is this sort of nice centre console treatment, which I didn't realise they had, but these were available in a couple of colours, and it's just sort of like this large piece of plastic which gives sort of like a nice colourful accent to the interior. The rest of it is pretty sort of on trend for the time, sort of a lot of use of darker colours, soft touch materials, lighter silvers and other things like that. Exterior wise, it's pretty much really sort of focusing on its sort of more practical heritage, so to speak, with the sort of scuff resistant arch items there, the sill covers, and obviously sort of lower parts of the body protected from scuffs should it do a little bit of off-roading. Probably more going down a forest track would sort of be probably the furthest this would get off-road. Tend to focus on some of the items that we have here. We obviously have the power button, which replaces a standard key. We also have capless refueling, which is interesting. So that was an innovation by Ford, where they had a filler neck that would only allow the right type of nozzle for the fuel that your vehicle accepted to go into it. So obviously reduced the amount of potential for people to fill up, say, petrol into a diesel car. Something that was still fairly new at the time, although Nissan had tried it in the early 2000s with Primera and Almera, is the reverse view camera. And that was something that became a lot more popular throughout the 2000s, and it's certainly technology that's sort of really sort of come down the tree from executive cars of a number of years before, or a few years before, and filtered into the mainstream. Also satellite navigation and integrated Bluetooth connectivity as well was also available. And this rather nifty and also practical split mini tailgate. So you could obviously just put smaller items into the boot, take them out without having to open the full tailgate, something that was seen on a number of vehicles around that time. Renault on the Modus had what they called a luggage chute, which was literally just of a tailgate piece at the bottom which sort of opened like that and allowed you to just chuck shopping in there. But that was only available on certain models, and obviously BMW have done this for a number of years with their touring range, where they would actually have the rear window opening to allow you to pop items into the boot. Also talk about the four-wheel drive system. If I recall, it's using a standard off-the-shelf Haldex setup, very similar to the one employed by VW in the Golf and Audi A3 four-wheel drive models. So obviously the Golf 4Motion and the Audi A3 Quattro. It worked fairly well. It was very much a standard off-the-shelf solution used by a lot of manufacturers around this time, and still used by a lot of manufacturers now. Did exactly what it should, and it was more sort of geared and aimed at on-road rather than off-road conditions. You could use it to a certain degree off-road, but you couldn't sort of really venture too far off-road because you didn't have locking differentials and other things that would be useful for proper off-road driving. The raised ride height does give you improved visibility and also improved ground clearance for tackling, say, sort of green lanes and forest tracks, but certainly its sort of real boon was for on-road motoring. Obviously a focus on build quality, and also a focus on a couple of other features such as improved braking capability, bi-xenon headlights which were available, also a certain aspect and focus on safety, obviously with the number of airbags that you have available, side impact beams, and what's like a beam cross member there across the front, in sort of behind the crumple zone on the bulkhead. Obviously to improve sort of general body rigidity, which is pretty good. Also, more features coming sort of down the tree and coming into the mainstream, such as obviously with the many airbags, but also electronic stability control, traction control, and emergency brake assist. All things that were really sort of coming into the market from about sort of 2006, 2007 onwards, and are still in the market today. So this is what I would sort of call as sort of class as one of the first proper modern cars, which is why even now at 13 years old, it doesn't really look that old. It still looks pretty current. I wouldn't say it's a timeless design because it probably will age, as those sort of Ford New Edge or whatever they called that design language at the time would inevitably do, but it's certainly standing the test of time. This is what I mean about the centre consoles. It adds a bit of a splash of colour to the interior, certainly on the Zetec range. Obviously in the nice blue with the blue accents on the seats and the blue trim on the door, but also you could get it in this rather nice orange as well. Looks like it was only available on the Zetec, and the Zetec was pretty much the base model. There was also MP3 connectivity as well, so it wasn't obviously intelligent MP3, it was just obviously a phono connection, as you can see down there. But it meant that you could take your iPod or Zune or insert name of other media player that you would have had at the time along for the trip. And it was sort of the first stage before these things sort of became truly integrated into the head units with sort of Android CarPlay or Android whatever it is and Apple CarPlay and all of that stuff. At this time we also had the titanium range, which gave us a slightly nicer, I think that's actually a Sony head unit. Climate control, I'm not sure if that's dual zone or not. Let's have a closer look. Yep, that is dual zone. Cruise control as well, rain sensing wipers, 17-inch alloys, auto dimming rear view mirror, which was a very useful feature, especially if you're doing a lot of night driving. And a number of other sort of nice features, such as the partial leather trim. Obviously the Sony audio system, so it was slightly more premium than the other one. Front carpet mats and other nice features. Footwell lights as well, which is quite a nice feature. Moving on to this page, we've obviously got a range of options. You could, although not available in the UK, you could go for a set of 17-inch 6-spoke Steelies. Those would be very useful if you had a set of winter tyres that you used. So certainly in countries like Germany and Sweden, where it is a legal requirement to run with winter tyres. I'm not sure if in Germany it's advisable. I know in Sweden it's a legal requirement. But a lot of owners will have a set of tyres, usually steel wheels with wheel trim covers, shod with suitable winter tyres, and then they would keep their nice alloy wheels shod with summer tyres. So it's a shame that option wasn't available in the UK, because it's certainly an option I would have gone for, to have a set of those, and for summer probably a set of these 19s, although with the condition of our roads the 18s would probably be more than enough. The scuff plates, that's a nice little feature. I'd certainly go for a set of the scuff plates. Colour wise, I'm not sure if we're going on to that, but we're looking now at head units. I rather like, actually, do you know what, I really like this Becker Traffic Pro. That's quite an old school satellite navigation system, but also with a multi-stack CD changer. The premium navigation system would be pretty good. Advanced, not too bad either. It just seems to be the change in sizes of screen. That's obviously your base entry level sat-nav system, but given that it's a Becker, it might actually be pretty good as regards quality, sound quality, etc. Certainly back in the time when they were putting head units into Mercedes, they were a pretty sort of premium brand. Not sure if they are anymore, and if they've gone the same way as a lot of other once premium brands such as Akai, but who knows. Many different lifestyle options. The sailboard carrier, the foldable roof box, the lockable crossbars, the expedition carrier basket, the bike rack, the, not so much a lifestyle choice, but the Britax child seat, which is quite good. So that's obviously a child seat designed or sort of particularly used for the car. That's a nice one. The cool box, that's really cool. Quite literally as well, but that's a nice feature. Takes up quite a lot of the boot though, but if you're doing a bit of outdoor cycling and other stuff like that, an ideal thing for keeping sandwiches and drinks nice and chilled. The load space liner, something that I would have definitely purchased if I'd had one of these. And the detachable tow bar, also available as a fixed version, and it's an option and accessory. Tow bar's always useful. My 2014 Zafira Tourer came with a detachable tow bar, and I've bought the car in 2015, and I've never used it. but I know it's there, so I'm sure it will come in use someday. But in the near 6 years I've owned the car, I've never used the tow bar. But anyway, and oh, it's got a more premium setup for the interior glass. But you see what I mean? You've got the frame around it, obviously, but in this you do have a nice, huge, quite frankly, open glass space, obviously with tinted glass. So that is a nice option. That's the panoramic roof. That's also available as the Titanium X-Pack. Quite nice to see at this time Ford was still using X-Pack terminologies, giving you something that was a cut above the top of the range. So certainly in the 80s you would have had, say, particularly on the Granada, you would have had gear. Then you would have had the Gear X, which is obviously the X-Pack on top of that. And right at the top of the range for the Mark II Granada, facelift Mark II Granada, was the Gear X Executive, which gave you obviously a 2.8 litre injected V6, a set of really nice, stylish TRX wheels, and air conditioning, leather, which looked like it almost had sort of like cushions on the actual seat. Lovely cars. But it's nice to see that Ford is sort of still keeping that tradition now with offering the X-Packs on the titanium grade. It is a shame they're not using the gear trim level anymore, because that was always, for me, the barometer of how great your Ford was. If it had a gear badge, it meant that you had made it. You were going somewhere with your life. Now, the boring bits at the back, talking about recycling. And also, and I think Ford were unique in offering this. Ford did offer a range of finance options, and this was certainly something that they were doing back in the 1980s. Some say that it may almost have been a shot in the foot, because a lot of other manufacturers, including more premium brands such as Mercedes and BMW, started to use a similar range of finance options for their vehicles, which meant that all of a sudden premium German marques were a lot more affordable than they once were. They were attainable, and it meant certainly that the Mondeo, the Sierra, well, obviously the Sierra, yeah, they're still very popular, but the Mark 1 Mondeo popular, Mark 2 popular, the Mark 3 Mondeo still fairly popular because it was on a lot of fleets. But when you sort of worked up to the Mark 4 Mondeo, by that time a lot of people were looking at entry-level E93 series BMWs, because they could afford to finance them, and it wouldn't have cost a huge amount extra a month than it would have to, say, have a Mondeo. And if you're conscious about the badge, what would you rather, BMW or Ford? And that brings us really to the end of the brochure. We're now just looking at interior equipment, exterior equipment, and other options. Also looking at the interior now, so obviously sort of the range of options that you could have. Certainly in a lot of the 80s Ford brochures I've had, this whole sort of section for each of the models was very busy, let's say. It's quite nice that this is quite easy to read. The older Ford brochures had sort of pale pastel shades on the background, and a lot more divisions of lines and things on the grids that you've got here, which did make them a little bit harder to navigate. This is pretty simple. If it's got a black, it means it's standard. If it's got a clear, it means it's probably optional or not part of the pack. And obviously if it's got a line, it means that you can't have it at all. Tough luck. Then we come through to the performance, and it seems that the only engine you could get, I thought you could get more engines, but certainly at this time the only engine you could get was a 2 litre Duratorque TDCi with a DPF, 6-speed manual all-wheel drive, developing a maximum power output of 136 PS, which is about 134 brake horsepower. Newton meters torque, 320 Newton meters, 169 grams per kilometre. Around town it did about 34 to the gallon, combined about 44, and extra urban about 52.3. So yeah, not that bad really, really sort of quite average for the time. 0 to 62, 10.7 seconds, but obviously it's the acceleration between when you're in gears, which was the certainly the sort of the big thing. 9.4 seconds, 31 to 62. I guess that's probably measured, if we look at the star, in 4th gear, so 4th gear pull, which, yeah, that's not too bad, I suppose. That's not bad. You know, you go from town speed to highway speed in about 9.4 seconds. Certainly safe. In America, I think they call that an on-ramp pull. So 500 yard long on-ramp, and how long it takes to get from entry speed to highway speed. Certainly it's one of the measures that they sort of tend to use, along with quarter mile times and other things like that. And finally, colours, my favourite bit. I always like to talk about the colours. So Ford have always been pretty good with their range of colours. They do give you a lot of options. Your absolute base, frozen white. But then we've got a lot of metallic colours. Number 9, that's Tango. Number 10, Vision. Number 7, Panther Black, that's a nice one. Moondust Silver, or Resale Silver, it's quite a popular colour. But I would personally have Kelp, which looks like a really nice dark metallic green. I would also go for Titanium with the X-Pack, so I'd get the Napoli leather, and I would only be able to get it in ebony, which is a shame, but you know, I'm not going to be too upset. And it gives you the H bezel colour. I guess that is the centre console. So on the Zetec you can have it in Lagoon Blue or generic orange, but the Titanium, because it's sort of the more sort of mature trim level, I suppose, you only get it in Pontus, which I think is that sort of like a dark sort of gunmetal colour. And that brings us to the end. Still a fairly new car in my eyes, but it is now, you know, it is now nearly 14 years old. But anyway, if you have found this video interesting, don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching, take care, and see you soon.